After marrying the campus tyrant I had secretly loved since my girlhood, his goddess came back. The moment he heard the news, the man who had always been calm and self-possessed immediately booked a flight home, leaving me behind on the streets of a foreign land. When I was being robbed, he was holding the girl he had finally gotten back tightly in his arms. Rosie was John's angel. In the barren world of his youth, she was the only rose in full bloom. He always read the English poems she liked. He carefully kept Rosie's rabbit hair tie. In the study he never allowed me to enter. Her dance dress hung on the wall. What was even more ridiculous was that it wasn't until the 7th day after abandoning me that John finally thought of me. But by then, I was already dead. They couldn't even find my body. Later, clutching the torn, blood-stained hem of my dress, he cried like a child who had done something terribly wrong. But what was the point? Chapter 1. The day Rosie returned to the country. John and I were on our honeymoon abroad. Calling it a honeymoon wasn't quite accurate. John had flown overseas for business and simply brought me along. When Rosie's call came in, we were listening to a street performer play the violin. The violinist was an elderly gentleman, impeccably dressed like a refined gentleman. The melody was soft and lingering. A breeze lifted the hem of my dress, brushing it against the edge of his coat, the two entwining intimately with the moving music. I tilted my head and looked at his sharp, handsome profile, my heart filled with joy and contentment. How wonderful! 6 years ago, the person I loved was now right by my side. Before the piece had even finished, his phone rang. The moment John answered, his usually cool, indifferent eyes were suddenly flooded with an indescribable mix of panic and wild joy. Even his always steady voice trembled. "Wait for me. I'm coming to find you." After hanging up, his breathing was a little rushed. "We're going back home immediately." I didn't understand what was happening and spoke up. "But didn't we agree?" Before I could finish my words, tinged with grievance and confusion, he cut me off sharply. "Hannah, stop making trouble." I froze. When I met his unnaturally cold gaze, it felt as if all the blood in my body had frozen in an instant. He yelled at me. It was as if a large hand had clenched my heart hard, sore and aching. "Is it Rosie?" A name flashed through my mind. My voice was strained as I looked at him and asked softly, "If you still care about her, why did you marry me?" John didn't answer. After a moment of silence, he closed his eyes and let out a deep breath. "She's just a friend I haven't seen in years. Stay here and enjoy yourself for a few more days. I'll head back first." As if he had lost all patience, John turned and left without hesitation. He didn't look back. His steps were urgent and resolute. Just like that, he left me alone on the streets of a foreign country. As if echoing my state of mind, the sky quickly darkened. It started to rain. The romantic, ancient city disappeared into the misty rain, losing its former brilliance. An inexplicable sense of desolation and melancholy crept in. I stood there in a daze, utterly miserable. 6 years of companionship couldn't measure up to a single sentence from Rosie. "I'm back." Hadn't he already let her go? If he still loved Rosie, why had he proposed to me? In the end, I couldn't hold back my tears. They poured out uncontrollably. A flock of white doves flew across the gray sky. I raised my hand to brush the damp strands of hair stuck to my face behind my ear and wiped away my tears hard. Anything that can be discarded so easily was never that important. To John, I was probably just that. Fine then, divorce. After the grievance and disappointment passed, all that remained was exhaustion. I made up my mind to get a divorce as soon as I returned home. But before I ever got the chance, I died that very night. Chapter 2. After I died, my soul did not dissipate. Across the vast ocean, in a single instant, I arrived at John's side. He was at the hospital. I floated in midair, watching his travel-worn figure hurry down the corridor and push open the door to a hospital room. Inside, a beautiful young woman lay pale against the pillows and slowly opened her eyes. John did not go in. His tall, slender figure stood at the doorway, one hand gripping the doorknob so tightly that veins bulged along the back of his hand. "You came," Rosie said through a choke, her eyes instantly reddening. She sat up, her chin thin and sharp, her dark eyes brimming with tears. After a long silence, John finally moved. He walked to the bedside, his voice cold and restrained. "What happened?" "I fought with my parents. After I came back, I was in a car accident by myself. These past years, have you been well? I heard, you got married. Rosie clenched the blanket, her lips deathly pale as she lowered her eyes and spoke softly. John gave a low ahem. I wasn't brave enough. I was the one who let go of your hand first. Congratulations. Rosie lifted her tear-blurred eyes and forced a faint smile. Focus on recovering. I'll arrange a caregiver. There was little expression on John's face. His features distant, his voice low, as he turned to leave, but I knew how turbulent his heart was. Don't go, Rosie said, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. She threw back the blanket and ran over, hugging him from behind. Don't go. John, I miss you so much. Please don't ignore me. I'm so scared you'll ignore me. Her slender arms wrapped tightly around his waist as Rosie pressed herself against his back. Sobbing uncontrollably, John stiffened, instinctively trying to pull her away, but those helpless, aggrieved sobs poured into his ears, and the pain in his eyes surged. Slowly, he stopped resisting. I stood facing John, a fine, spreading ache blooming through my transparent body. I knew it well, he could never bear to see Rosie cry. Once she cried, his heart softened. Sure enough, the cold indifference John had forced onto himself melted away in an instant. Don't be afraid. I won't ignore you. Rosie was barefoot. He slowly turned around, lifted the girl who had completely broken down, and placed her back onto the hospital bed. Rosie buried herself in his arms, crying so hard she could barely catch her breath. John paused. Then, as if in reluctant surrender, wrapped his arms around her and gently stroked her long hair again and again, coaxing her softly. Don't cry. I'm here with you. I watched coldly, feeling like a complete joke. I had been by John's side for 6 years, yet I had never seen him this gentle or patient. By day, he was distant. By night, he was domineering and forceful, carrying an irresistible ferocity, as if he wanted to tear me apart and devour me whole. He had never been this tender and careful, not even for a moment. This was the first day after he abandoned me. My battered, wounded body was thrown into an icy, bone-chilling river, carried by the rushing current. I drifted and sank in loneliness, and he was holding another woman. Rosie cried for a long time, coaxed by John's gentle words. Her tears gradually stopped. Will you stay with me in the hospital the whole time? She asked nervously, looking up at him, her lashes still wet with tears. I will. John picked up a tissue and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. Promise you won't lie. Rosie smiled in satisfaction, her voice soft and sweet. Promises are only remembered by the ones who hear them. John did not break his. He stayed with Rosie the entire night. The next day, Rosie was transferred to a premium ward. The premium ward had everything. It was like a small apartment. John had his assistant deliver clothes and daily necessities. He rarely cooked. Yet just because Rosie said she wanted to eat something he made, he spent the entire afternoon busy in the kitchen. I drifted over and sat on the windowsill, staring blankly at his busy figure. This was the second day after my death, and my husband was cooking for the girl he loved most. He hadn't called me even once. His eyes and heart were filled only with Rosie. To John, I was probably truly unimportant. I closed my eyes in exhaustion. If I could go back to that evening again, I would never fall in love with him. The torrential rain continued to fall, the current growing more violent. My body, soaked for so long, began to swell and turn ghastly pale. Passing through a tributary, it merged into an even wider river. Chapter 3. John lost his parents at a young age and was raised by his grandparents. A handsome delinquent boy, he skipped classes and got into fights all day long, indulging himself without restraint. He was the school's universally acknowledged bad apple. We were never supposed to cross paths until the first seating arrangement after we split into liberal arts and science tracks in our sophomore year. When the teacher told us to choose our own desk mates, I was introverted and quiet. No one chose me. In the end, the teacher had no choice but to assign me to a single desk in the very last row. By dinner time, everyone had left. I lay face down on my desk, sobbing softly, feeling like I was utterly pathetic, lost in my anxiety and fear. I didn't notice that John was still in the classroom, asleep with his head down, woken up by my noise. He walked over with a dark expression, tapped my desk 3 times with his knuckles. Irritation in his voice. "What are you crying for?" I don't have a desk mate," I blurted out honestly, startled and stammering. "Just because of that, you skipped dinner and hid in the classroom crying for 3 days straight?" Meeting my tear-soaked eyes, John hadn't expected that and was momentarily speechless. Impatiently, he snapped at me, "Stand up." I didn't even dare wipe my tears. I immediately stood up straight, afraid that if I was even a second late, the bad-tempered delinquent in front of me would hit me. John shoved his hands into his pockets and lifted his leg, kicking hard. With a loud bang, my single desk slid straight forward for 3 meters, then crashed heavily into his. "Put them together. Stop crying. From now on, I'm your desk mate." John stood in front of the glass windows, a massive sunset behind him. The beautiful boy's features were sharp and striking, his pitch-black eyes full of rebellious defiance. His jacket hung loosely on him, radiating an unmistakable air of roguishness. A burning heat crept up from my neck to my cheeks. I stared at him blankly. The pink-orange sunset easily dyed the once wavering, pale heart of a young girl with color. Chapter 4. John was arrogant. "Rabbit, let me copy your homework." Fresh from a nap, John stretched lazily, his expression casual and unbothered. I silently handed him my notebook. He called me Rabbit because I was timid. On the day of the major snow solar term, it was his birthday. I used my New Year's lucky money to buy a crystal ball. Inside was a miniature scene, a wooden house on a snowy day. Through a half-open window, you could see a lit fireplace inside, the warm, dim glow of lamplight, and a little boy sitting on the sofa, eating snacks and watching TV. In stark contrast to the icy, snow-covered world outside, the interior looked warm as spring. "John, happy birthday." I handed him the gift box, my cheeks burning. John froze, surprise flashing through his eyes. "This is the first birthday present I've ever received," he said as he took it, his voice slightly hoarse. His long fingers brushed over the gift box, his face full of uncertainty. Tom poked his head in from the back door and called out, "John, not going out for a smoke? Everyone's waiting for you." "Not going." "Get lost." John didn't even lift his eyes as he dismissed him briskly. He opened the gift box, took out the crystal ball, and examined it carefully for a long time before cautiously placing it deep inside his desk. "Rabbit, thank you. I really like it." John leaned sideways on his elbow, looking at me with a trace of fragmented laughter in his eyes. That was the first time he ever smiled at me. The vines coiled around my heart grew wildly, blooming with tiny flowers. My heart pounded violently. I hurriedly turned my head away, not daring to look at him a second time. He didn't seem to notice that beside the little boy, on the blanket, lay an inconspicuous little rabbit. Chapter 5. Winter break passed, and the new semester began. The school started collecting lunch fees. John put it off for 2 days and still hadn't paid. I secretly paid it for him. That was the only time I ever lied to my parents, saying I'd lost the money, taking advantage of free activity time during PE class. I ran back to the classroom, wrapped the cash in a slip of paper, and put it into the class monitor's pencil case. On the note, I wrote, "John's lunch fee." I had carefully copied a cute font from an app on my phone at home, and even added a tiny heart at the end. I didn't want John to know it was me. I was afraid he'd feel awkward. But John knew someone had helped him. Holding that note, his face stayed expressionless for days. Had I hurt his pride? I hesitated, torn over whether I should explain everything to him. After days of overthinking, I finally worked up the courage to tell him. But then John suddenly decided to pursue Rosie from the class next door. "John, why are you suddenly going after Rosie? You didn't even bother with her before." Tom scratched his head and asked. "Don't ask. I'm going after her no matter what," John replied lazily, raising his voice. I sat beside him, gripping my pen tightly, my mood plunging straight to rock bottom. My vision gradually blurred as I tried hard to suppress the tears in my eyes, but they refused to listen, dripping onto the exam paper in front of me, quietly spreading through the black lines of text. Chapter 6. Rosie had excellent grades, was beautiful, graceful, and talented in many ways. Once, John and I were sent together to deliver English workbooks to another teaching building. Passing by the dance studio, we saw Rosie through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Her neck was long, her limbs agile and fluid, like a graceful white swan, as if possessed by some impulse. I stopped in my tracks and immediately turned to look at John beside me. He showed no particular reaction, his indifferent gaze sweeping past Rosie. "What? You want to go in and jump around too?" Holding the workbooks with one arm, John freed his other hand and lightly tapped my head. "I can't." "So what? You're a rabbit. If you jumped, you'd definitely be better than all of them," he teased casually, curling his lips as he tapped my forehead again. Spring was warm, and a gentle breeze lifted the hem of his jacket. That day, the laid-back boy stood beneath the willow tree, his smile especially beautiful. Later, they started dating. One afternoon, he brought back an English poetry collection. A student in the front row shook the water off their hands, and a few droplets splashed onto the book's cover. I reached out to wipe it away for him. "Don't touch it!" John shouted sharply, his large hand slapping down on mine. Smack! I clutched the burning back of my hand and said softly, "There was water on it. I just wanted to help wipe it off." "Sorry, Hannah." John snapped back to himself, looking a little remorseful. John stopped calling me rabbit. On his wrist was a rabbit hair tie he had snatched from Rosie. The delicate hair tie left a thin red mark around his wrist. "You like Byron's poems?" "Rosie likes them. It's hers." When he mentioned Rosie, John's eyes curved gently. He had Tom find a bag, then with one sweep of his arm, quickly cleared out everything in his desk compartment, making space. "John, you're throwing all this away? Maybe you should take another look," Tom asked, pointing at the bag of items. "No need. It's all just random junk," John replied. "So I'll throw it out?" John gave a low ahem. He didn't even lift his head, fully focused on carefully placing that poetry book into his desk. I watched helplessly. The birthday gift I had given him, that crystal ball, get casually swept into the bag and thrown away. Chapter 7. Their early romance was discovered by Rosie's parents. In the second semester of her sophomore year, Rosie transferred schools. She said she wanted to focus on studying and told John to come find her after the college entrance exam. From then on, John studied like his life depended on it, as if possessed, determined to make up for every bit of knowledge he had fallen behind on. Time flew by, and the college entrance exam ended. I heard from classmates that Rosie had abandoned John and gone abroad. I thought I would never cross paths with him again, but in my junior year of college, I ran into him on campus. He had a suit jacket draped over his arm, his brows and eyes filled with distance, his temperament refined and aloof. The reckless arrogance of his youth had transformed into calm composure. "Long time no see. I started a project with some alumni. There's a collaboration with your school," John said politely. I happened to be one of the people in charge of the liaison. In the blink of an eye, 2 more years passed. After graduation, he pulled in several partners to invest and start a business. John had sharp instincts and always made the most advantageous decisions, carving out a path through the turbulent market. Tempted by the high salary, I joined his company as a special assistant, treating him strictly as my boss. Business dealings inevitably involve social engagements, and it was usually the male assistant's job to drive him home. But that day, the male assistant happened to take leave, so I drove John back myself. The car was silent. John leaned back in the rear seat with his eyes closed, long lashes resting quietly. I thought he was asleep. In a good mood, I softly hummed a tune. "What's making you so happy? Let me hear it too." A hoarse male voice suddenly sounded. So he was awake. "Today is my aunt's birthday. My mom sent me a video of their gathering. It looked pretty lively," I said awkwardly. John gave a low hum. Birthdays should be properly celebrated with family. He seemed utterly exhausted, rubbing his temples, his voice steeped in weariness. When we reached the apartment building, the engine cut off and John got out. For some reason, the tall, handsome man's back looked unexpectedly lonely and desolate. In the end, I couldn't hold it in and called out to him, "John, happy birthday to you too." I remembered, today was his birthday as well. John paused for a moment, then, with his back to me, said thank you. Chapter 8. Later, I had a suitor and planned to have dinner together after work. In the parking lot, the male assistant who was about to accompany John to a business dinner teased me. "Hannah, why do you look especially polished today? Got a boyfriend?" "No, just going out for a meal," I said shyly, pursing my lips in a smile. Beep, beep, beep. Not far away, a Cayenne honked. The car window rolled down, revealing a sharply defined face. He swept his gaze over me from head to toe, clearly in a bad mood. Brows furrowed as he urged Assistant Tony to get in quickly. As the moon rose high, halfway through dinner, my phone rang. Assistant Tony said John had drunk too much, kept calling my name, and insisted I come over. He couldn't handle him. Resigned, I went to pick up my boss. "You're finally here." "Boss John won't let me drive him," Assistant Tony said, opening the driver's side door with a bitter, helpless expression. Still slightly out of breath, I leaned halfway in. "John, you were looking for me?" John slumped over the steering wheel, slowly lifted his head. His tie was loose, 2 buttons of his shirt undone, revealing pale, cool-toned collarbones. Drunk John was especially sluggish. He stared at me hazily for a long while before finally speaking. "I wanted you to take me home." Then he stretched out his long legs and shifted his whole body into the passenger seat. There was no choice but to do it. Assistant Tony drove my car away, and for the second time, I became John's driver. When we reached his building, I woke him up. "Sorry for calling you over and interrupting your date. Did it cause any trouble?" John opened his eyes, bloodshot veins webbing across them. No, it wasn't really suitable anyway. "I'm not considering him anymore," I said, mortified. It was awkward, really awkward. "I'll leave the car here. I'll take a cab back." I pulled out the keys and handed them to John, about to get out. "Wait." John grabbed me, his handsome face suddenly moving close. "How about you consider me instead?" His expression was serious. The sharp smell of alcohol mixed with scorching breath washed over my face. "Huh?" I froze completely. Had I heard him right? I said, "Consider me." John's straight nose and burning lips brushed close to my ear as he repeated it. All these years, he had never mentioned Rosie even once. I thought he had already forgotten her. We got together. Though he seemed distant on the surface, he was considerate and steady with me. Only, the reckless, frenzied passion of his youth was gone. I felt a trace of disappointment, then quietly comforted myself. He wasn't that hot-headed boy anymore. This was good enough. I thought we could go on like this forever. Chapter 9. John cooked many dishes. Night fell over the city, and the dining table was filled to the brim. Rosie wore her long hair loose, her skin porcelain pale, her large almond eyes full of surprise. She picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs and exclaimed with a smile, "You still remember that I like this?" "I do." John didn't pick up his chopsticks. He opened a bottle of red wine and took a light sip. Sitting across from Rosie, he absent-mindedly drank, then turned his head to look at the neon lights outside the window. As if weighed down by something on his mind, I drifted around the dining table out of sheer boredom, the stabbing pain in my heart already numb. John was a good cook, but in the 6 years I spent with him, the number of times he cooked could be counted on one hand, and even then, only after I clung to him for ages, coaxing and begging, and after eating, he always collected interest. Endless, burning kisses. John, thoroughly practiced, gripped my waist and pressed down on me, his force fierce and merciless. I bit my lip, the corners of my eyes misted with tears, desperately suppressing the sobs that kept spilling out. Bastard. So it was never about the situation, only about the person. I let out a miserable sigh, feeling utterly unworthy for myself. On the 3rd day after my death, my body had been washed far away. Many strange-looking fish swam over curiously, gnawing at my flesh. They had been hungry for a long time. Jagged teeth tore into the bloated, waterlogged skin. My soul trembled in agony, growing ever more transparent. John was peeling an apple for Rosie, who was hooked up to an 4. On the 4th day, the torrential rain in the city finally stopped. A fish's tail brushed across my face. Water plants swept through my long hair. I didn't know where this was, only the solemn toll of church bells echoed faintly in the distance. Rosie pouted, complaining that the medicine was bitter and that she wanted sugar-roasted chestnuts. John drove off to buy them. The 5th day, the 6th day, on the 7th day, Rosie recovered and was discharged from the hospital. "I'll take you home," John said as he started the car after finishing the discharge paperwork. "I'm not going back." Rosie bit her lip and said softly, "John, can I go to your place?" "I'm married," John said in a low voice, frowning as he gripped the steering wheel. "Bastard. So you do remember you're married." Floating in the back seat, I laughed sarcastically. What a show of restraint. Just take her home already, after all. I'm dead. It's perfect. I'll even free up space for you. I know. I'll just stay one night. I'll find somewhere else tomorrow and leave. Please. Just help me this once. Tears swirled in Rosie's eyes, her expression pitiful. All right. After a moment of silence, John still agreed. I followed them back to the villa. John instructed the butler to prepare the guest room for Rosie. He was very busy. Calls from his assistant kept coming in. These past few days, he had been focused entirely on Rosie, barely handling any work matters. I watched Rosie flutter around my home like a butterfly, curious and light. "John, can I take a look around?" John was on the phone dealing with work and responded casually. Rosie went upstairs and stopped in front of the bedroom door. I watched helplessly as she twisted the handle and stepped into the bedroom. One step at a time. Disgusting. The hatred suppressed deep in my heart was stirred. I watched Rosie openly examine the furnishings, her slender fingers brushing over my vanity, my wardrobe, the velvet bed sheets. I completely broke down, trembling as I screamed, "Get out! Get out! Don't touch my things." Chapter 10. No one heard me. When I was exhausted from shouting, I drifted over and sat on the sofa for the entire afternoon. In the vase on the coffee table were several roses still dotted with dew. I propped my cheek in my hand, staring blankly in exhaustion. So tired. But at least I had a feeling I would be able to go home soon. I really wanted to go home. I hoped that when my parents learned of my death, they wouldn't be too heartbroken. The last time I called them, when they found out John and I were going abroad, they were happy, telling us not to rush back and to enjoy ourselves, travel properly. But I'm not coming back. Chapter 11. John didn't eat dinner and stayed in the study. The light stayed on until late at night. I drifted straight through the door. This was my first time entering his study. As a soul, the place where he worked was somewhere he never allowed others to step into. At work, he was always meticulous, rigid, and old-fashioned. Just like how he never allowed me to slip gummy candies into the pocket of his suit jacket. He would never allow anything unrelated to work to exist in this study. I understood, and I had always respected that rule. But now, I regretted it deeply. If I had pushed this door open earlier, I'd probably already be on my second marriage by now. The study was spacious. Every document and book was arranged neatly. On one corner of the desk lay a book, an English poetry collection by Byron, old and yellowed with age. Beside the floor lamp hung a dress, a very beautiful dance dress, a white strapless satin dress, its flared skirt adorned with several warm, translucent pearls. Around the waist was wrapped a pale pink layer of gauze, tied into a loose, slanted bow, like a swaying bud waiting to bloom. Whose it belonged to was self-evident. Liar. I let out a heavy sigh. All these years of never mentioning Rosie, yet he had kept her things displayed in his study the entire time. Unexpectedly, John wasn't working. He leaned back against the chair, fingers lightly tapping the desktop, eyes closed, lost in thought. Maybe he was thinking about how to bring up divorce with me. I sneered and floated above his head, hopping vigorously. I couldn't wait. After a moment, he pulled open the drawer on the right and took out a square box. When he opened it, inside was a delicate rabbit hair tie, another one of Rosie's things. A knock sounded at the door. John stood up and opened it halfway. "I saw your light was still on." Rosie stood there in a thin nightgown, blinking playfully. "What is it?" She hesitated before asking. "Are you still upset that I went abroad after the college entrance exam and ignored you?" That's all in the past. After the initial turbulence of the first day, John's reactions toward Rosie had grown increasingly indifferent. I glanced at him in confusion. After a brief silence, Rosie's gaze drifted past John's shoulder and accidentally landed on the dance dress inside the study. "Oh, That dress! Rosie exclaimed in surprise. She walked in on her own and noticed the poetry book and the hair tie on the desk. You kept all of them, John. You really still have me in your heart. Her earlier gloom vanished instantly. Rosie lifted her face and smiled at him, her tone bright and triumphant. I took a deep breath and almost felt like applauding. The ambiguity had been exposed. Next should come reminiscing about old feelings and rekindling their romance. I looked at John, waiting for his response along with Rosie. Stop pretending to be cold and distant. John didn't answer. He lowered his eyes, silent, his long lashes hiding his gaze. Rosie stepped closer, rose onto her tiptoes, and leaned in to kiss him. The scent of roses spread through the air. John didn't dodge. Just as her soft, tempting lips were about to touch him, John seemed to suddenly wake up. His pupils shrank, and he quickly turned his head and stepped back. This isn't right. What isn't right? When he looked up again, the tension between his brows had eased, and his eyes were filled with clarity. Rosie, I stopped loving you a long time ago. No matter how intense the feelings were in youth, they've long since passed. The person I love now is my wife. I love her very much. Under the soft lamplight, his thin lips formed a cold arc, his voice utterly calm. Then why did you keep these things? As if she had just heard the biggest joke in the world. Rosie found it laughable. Her pretty face was filled with disbelief. I kept these things, at first. It was true that I still had lingering feelings for you. John admitted it without hesitation. I will never forget the way your parents looked at me, like I was trash. They despised me. Said someone like me was pitiful, destined to be a down-and-out poor boy struggling in hardship for life. After you transferred schools, I studied like my life depended on it, not for you, but for my own self-respect. I saw you at your new school, walking closely with another boy. That's when I realized you were probably just playing around with me. That boy had good grades and a good family background. After graduation, you even went abroad together to study. In college, I started a business because I refused to accept it. I wanted to succeed and make you regret choosing someone else and leaving me. All these years, that unwillingness never truly disappeared from my heart. Every time I looked at these things, what came to mind wasn't sweet memories, but your parents' contemptuous expressions and your cold, decisive rejection. I kept reminding myself, I had to become stronger. I couldn't let myself be looked down on again. I couldn't let myself be played again. John's voice was light, like the wind. So, you knew all along, Rosie murmured. Shame and humiliation flickered across her eyes. After I became successful, when I received your call, that buried unwillingness began to stir again, like sparks igniting a wildfire. It burned away my reason. I lost my head. I pretended to be gentle and coaxed you. Watched you deliberately act cute. Watched the regret you couldn't quite hide. But I felt no satisfaction, only growing impatience. The feeling was deeply conflicting. Then why did you keep acting? Why did you take care of me for so many days? Rosie's eyes widened. Tears fell chaotically as she asked the question at last, her voice trembling. Because you helped me when I was at my lowest. You paid my lunch fees. Rosie, leave tomorrow morning. After that, we're even. John looked down at her, standing alone, his dark eyes chillingly cold. Rosie could no longer stay. She moved toward the door. At the doorway, she turned back. I remember you once came to ask me whether it was me who paid your lunch fees. Those few times when we met and I tried to talk to you, you ignored me. That time, you actually came to me first. I was surprised for a few seconds, then I agreed. Funny coincidence, I've always liked using that exact font when I write. Since someone helped a classmate and wanted to remain anonymous, I couldn't just waste such a good opportunity. Rosie smoothed her long hair, the corner of her lips lifting into a mocking smile. John, the person who helped you wasn't me. You mistook the person. Only fools do thankless things. But I'm not a fool. Chapter 12. Rosie's words struck John like a heavy blow, pinning him in place. Hannah. After a deathly silence, a murmur suddenly slipped from between John's lips. Did he really guess that accurately? Was I really that much like a fool? I let out a quiet sigh. So this was why he had suddenly taken an interest in Rosie and gone after her. Because of that lunch fee. Why he had gone to find her. Because of the resentment of being looked down on in his youth. At this moment, I couldn't quite describe what I was feeling. But wrong was wrong. It was too late. Everything had already changed. And I had no real regrets. Even if John had known back then that it was I who paid his lunch fees. So what? To be honest, there were always many pretty girls around him. And high school me was so ordinary. So unremarkable. He might have been grateful to me. But that didn't mean he would have liked me. Just like when I gave him the first birthday present of his life, it was meaningful. He was touched. Yes. But that was all. In this world, many things turn out the same no matter who you replace. Moonlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, casting a long, thin strip of light across the floor. John returned to the bedroom and opened WeChat. He rubbed the screen with his thumb. After a long pause, he typed a line. "I'll come pick you up." The screen dimmed automatically. 10 minutes passed. No reply. "Hannah, just come home first." No reply. John grew restless. He took a cigarette case from the nightstand and lit one. Bluish-white smoke blurred his brows and eyes as he dialed my number. Beep, beep, beep. The cold mechanical voice informed him that no one was answering. Switching back to WeChat, he sent another message. "Hannah, I was wrong. I can explain. Can you at least call me back?" Dawn broke, the sky turning a pale fishbelly white. John received a call from overseas. Not from me, from the police. They informed him of my death. "That's impossible. You must have the wrong number." John laughed weakly, his voice trembling. "Sir, we are absolutely certain. We will also notify the victim's parents shortly. Please come in as soon as possible." After hanging up, John rushed toward the airport in a daze, still calling me and sending messages non-stop along the way. "Hannah, you're definitely just mad at me. It was my fault. I shouldn't have left you behind. I lost my head back then. Don't scare me. Just reply to me, okay? It's my fault. Just give me a call." Even after the plane landed, he kept sending messages tirelessly, but they were destined to sink without a trace, never to receive a response. The officer in charge of reception was waiting at the airport entrance. "You must have made a mistake. I'll sue you," John said calmly as he got into the car. The police car sped away. At the station, John was led into a room. After a brief pause, the officer succinctly summarized the entire case. "Sir, it is with the deepest regret that I must inform you of the following. Your wife, Ms. Hannah, was murdered. One of the suspects was arrested yesterday for robbery while searching his residence for stolen goods. We unexpectedly found a severed finger in a trash bin. After interrogation, we learned that 7 days ago, on a rainy afternoon, Ms. Hannah took a taxi to the airport and was abducted by the driver. The suspect then called in 2 intoxicated accomplices. The 3 of them stripped the victim of all valuables. They couldn't remove her ring, so they cut off her finger. They strangled the victim to death with a rope and, taking advantage of the heavy rain and darkness, threw her body into the river. The ring, phone, and handbag were all sold by the suspects. This is a photo of the severed finger, and this is a photo of the cloth wrapped around it. The suspect confessed that the strip of cloth had been torn from the victim's dress. The physical evidence will be delivered shortly. The officer took out 2 photographs and placed them on the table. The cut on the finger in the photo was horrifying. The fragment of the dress hem was covered in dark, mottled bloodstains that had already dried. John held the photos, his fingers whitening as they trembled uncontrollably. His tall figure swayed. He braced one hand on the table to keep himself from collapsing, the forced composure on his face barely holding together. He was still stubbornly lying to himself. "It's not her. You must have made a mistake. She's just angry at me and hiding somewhere. This isn't her." A thin sheen of tears rose at the corners of John's eyes. His breathing was rapid, like the rotting gasp before death, desperate and powerless. The police officer looked at him with pity. After days of continuous heavy rain, few people were out, and after the victim went missing, no one reported it in time. So the best opportunity was missed. The body was carried downstream by the rising water. Based on our calculations, with days of torrential rain and the river's complex branches, there is an extremely high probability that the body was washed into the sea and cannot be recovered. When strangling the victim, the 3 suspects also recorded a video. He turned on the computer and played the footage. What appeared on the screen was my pale, calm face. When fear reaches its extreme, There is nothing left to be afraid of. The suspect stepped back, letting the camera capture my entire body. My finger had been cut off. Large patches of blood stained the floor and my dress. My hands and feet were bound. "Are you married?" one of the suspects asked curiously. "If you hadn't kidnapped me, I would already be divorced," I said weakly, having lost too much blood. "Why?" "He abandoned me to go find his ex-girlfriend." "Oh my, poor lady." Mocking laughter and jeers spread as the drunken criminals burst into laughter. "Before you die, is there anything you want to say?" "No, nothing to say to your unfaithful husband?" someone asked as they looped the rope around my neck. There was nothing worth saying, but saying nothing still felt a little unwilling. After all, this was my final last word. I looked straight into the camera and spoke softly. "John, if I could start over, I would stay far, far away from you." Ding dong. Time's up. Cruel, feral laughter filled the room. The rope tightened. The image shook. Who was cheering? And who was crying? Bang! "I'll kill them! I'll kill them!" John slammed his fist down onto the computer, like a wild beast driven into a corner, eyes bloodshot as he howled in agony. "Sir, please calm down." People rushed into the room, restraining the nearly deranged John. Overwhelming grief swept over him. He clutched his chest and doubled over, barely able to stand. Someone knocked and entered to deliver the physical evidence. Seeing John's emotional state, the officer waved them away for the moment. "Give it back to me! Give it to me!" John struggled violently, roaring as he lunged forward. He managed to snatch one of the bags. "Hannah, Hannah," cradling the tattered, blood-stained hem of the dress. John cried loudly like a child who had done something unforgivable. The officers coming and going sighed, whispering among themselves. I watched coldly, no longer feeling a single ripple in my heart. My parents arrived. They were taken into another room. When my mother saw the video, she collapsed into hysterical wails, unable to bear the shock, and fainted. She was rushed to the hospital. My father cried until his voice was hoarse. Supported by others, he staggered out, walked up to John, and slapped him hard across the face. A full 7 days before he remembered to message Hannah. "My daughter can't even have her body recovered. This is how you took care of Hannah. This is how you treated my daughter." John stood there blankly, unmoving. His cheek was swollen and red, his eyes shattered and empty. The body was never found in the end. The criminals were sentenced. In that country, the death penalty for robbery and murder was execution by hanging. Half a month later, my parents cremated my severed finger and placed the ashes into a small porcelain jar. Avoiding John, they took me back to my country on their own. The plane cut across the sky, leaving behind a long trail of clouds. Hours later, it landed steadily. I returned to my homeland. Fallen leaves returned to their roots. I was finally home. The gentle sunlight was incredibly warm. I felt lighter than the wind itself. I lingered, brushing softly against my parents' cheeks, saying goodbye without a sound. "Mom, Dad, goodbye. Please take good care of yourselves." 3 days later, a piece of news appeared in the local newspaper. John Kim, CEO of the Kim Group, had slit his wrists and committed suicide. Rescue efforts failed. He was dead. Extra. When Hannah regained consciousness and opened her eyes again, a sudden loud bang sounded in her ears. A single desk slid several meters away and slammed heavily into another desk. Share the desk. Outside the glass window was a pink-orange sunset. The good-looking boy impatiently grabbed her wrist and dragged her, who still hadn't come back to her senses, over to the seat. "Sit here. I'm your desk mate now. And don't cry anymore in the future." Everything felt so familiar. Hannah stared blankly at John. She blinked her eyes, still wet with tears, her expression dazed. She was dead. And then she had returned to that afternoon in her sophomore year of high school. Hannah reacted quickly. Her face suddenly went cold, her eyes and brows filled with unmistakable indifference. Without a word, she stood up and dragged her single desk back to its original spot. "What? I'm not good enough to be your desk mate?" John watched Hannah pull her desk back, sneering with a cold face. Hannah didn't speak. She didn't even lift her head, treating him like air as she lowered her gaze and organized the books on her desk. "TCH. This girl," He'd been kind enough to rush over and offer to be her deskmate. And she actually despised him for it. John felt his pride take a hit. "Hey, I'm talking to you." He strode over in a few steps and reached out to grab her wrist. The scalding heat touched her skin as if she'd been touched by something filthy. Hannah immediately flung his hand away. "Don't touch me." She glared at John and said hatefully. The touch that had once made her heart race now filled her with nothing but disgust and revulsion. She couldn't clearly remember what happened after she died. When her soul hovered around John, she only vaguely knew that John had abandoned her and stayed by other women's sides instead. Disgusting. Given a second chance at life, she absolutely did not want to have anything to do with John ever again. After calming her agitated emotions, Hannah pulled a wet wipe from her backpack and carefully wiped the place on her wrist where John had touched her. In the girl's eyes, red and swollen from crying for so long, there was undisguised loathing. That look startled John. The always carefree expression on his face was filled with confusion and helplessness. "Classmate, how did I offend you?" He couldn't remember ever having wronged her. Having sorted out her emotions, Hannah's expression returned to calm indifference. She finished tidying her desk, pulled out her chair, and began reading and flipping through her notes. After so many years, she had forgotten most of the high school material. She needed to hurry and start from the beginning, chewing through the textbooks again, or she wouldn't be able to keep up. John just stood there to the side, completely ignored, watching Hannah transform from timid and submissive just moments ago into someone completely unapproachable. He was utterly baffled. After standing there in a daze for a long while, he grew embarrassed and annoyed. Heh, doesn't want to be his deskmate. Huh? He'd make it happen anyway. Evening self-study was about to begin. Students gradually returned to the classroom, and John shoved his hands into his pockets and went to the teacher's office. Since it hadn't been long since the classes were reshuffled, it wasn't ideal for a young girl to sit alone at a single desk. That very night, the homeroom teacher paired the two of them as deskmates. Hannah frowned and went to look for the homeroom teacher, who patiently explained the reasons to her. Unable to argue her way through, Hannah could only endure it for now. She'd endure it until the midterm exams. Once the homeroom teacher saw her excellent grades, there was no way she'd still be made to sit with a delinquent underachiever like John. Tisk. I'll be in your care from now on, deskmate. John sat beside her, propping his chin with his elbow, wearing a lazy air as he tilted his head to look at her. The boy's bangs were slightly messy, his long, thick eyelashes trembling faintly. He stared intently at Hannah's face, so calm it was almost detached, trying to find some other emotion on it. But he was disappointed. Hannah didn't acknowledge him at all, burying her head in the stack of textbooks piled high in front of her. For some reason, there was a hollow, panicked feeling in his chest, as if things were never meant to turn out this way. John forcibly suppressed that strange sensation. His tongue quietly swept over his lower lip as he ground his teeth and said, "Ignoring me? Huh? Fine. I've got a temper too. I'll ignore you as well." With a sour expression, he took off his school uniform jacket, tossed it onto the desk, and lay face down on it, sulking as he fell asleep. Yet after a week passed, John ultimately couldn't hold out anymore. He truly couldn't figure it out. Why was Hannah so unwilling to talk to him? Was it because he'd kicked her desk that day? Or because he'd hurt her when he grabbed her wrist? That couldn't be it, right? Irritated to the extreme, John secretly smoked a cigarette during the break. When he came back, he saw a boy sitting in the front row turned around, discussing a problem with Hannah. Hannah spoke softly, their heads closed together, almost touching. A burst of nameless anger suddenly flared up inside him. The rage surged through his limbs and bones, making his fingers tremble uncontrollably. Why is she only cold to me? He strode over and yanked the chair back, sitting down hard. With a sharp screech of friction against the floor, the noisy classroom abruptly fell silent, and the students all looked over. The boy in the front row was startled. He hastily wrapped up the discussion, grabbed his workbook, and turned back around. "Rabbit, what exactly did I do to offend you?" John pressed his tongue against his cheek, his chest rising and falling as his pitch-black eyes fixed steadily on her. He looked like he wouldn't give up without an answer. As soon as the words fell, Hannah froze. She put down her pen, lifted her eyes to meet his gaze, and spoke softly. "Why do you call me Rabbit?" Oh, she's finally willing to talk to me. That day when you glared at me, your eyes were all red. The corners of John's lips curved uncontrollably upward, and the suffocating frustration and gloom swirling in his chest instantly dissipated. Rabbits are so cute. Calling her Rabbit, she shouldn't mind, right? But in the very next second, the smile froze on his face. I hate it when people give me nicknames. If I hear it again, I'll tell the homeroom teacher. The girl in front of him looked cold and detached, delivering the longest sentence she had ever spoken to him. It felt as if his heart had been squeezed hard, a dull ache spreading through it. Why do you hate me so much? The light in his eyes gradually dimmed. John stared at Hannah's indifferent profile and murmured to himself. Clearly, before this, they had never had any interaction at all. He didn't understand why she disliked him so much, just like he didn't understand why he cared about Hannah this much either. Soon, the midterm exams arrived. The teachers worked overtime and finished grading all the papers in a single day. Hannah's efforts over the past month hadn't been in vain. Many concepts that once felt unfamiliar came back after a few rounds of review. She jumped from the lower middle ranks after the class reshuffle straight to 5th place in the class. The last row was no longer suitable for her. This time, without Hannah even needing to ask, the homeroom teacher moved her to a seat by the window in the first row, grabbing her backpack, moving her desk. Everything was done in one smooth motion. Hannah didn't look back once. Her ponytail swayed as she left with effortless confidence. John leaned back in his chair, curling his fingers as he tapped the desktop absent-mindedly. Through the dense crowd of heads, he looked forward and could only see the back of Hannah's head. John, why have you seemed so out of it these past few days? Tom slipped in through the back door from another class and asked, rubbing his nose. Leave me alone. John kept staring at that head in front of him, his long lashes half lowered, concealing the disappointment in his eyes. You're not catching feelings, are you, John? Tom followed his line of sight and saw a single silhouette. Obviously a girl. Yeah, so what? John hummed in response. Well, just looking won't get you anywhere. You've got to take action. Tom slapped his thigh and immediately began offering strategies. During the break 2 days later, John stood in front of Hannah's desk holding his English textbook and asked in a serious tone. Class representative, can you teach me how to read this text? I don't have time. Go ask the study committee member, Hannah replied, her expression flat. You were just chatting a moment ago. John refused to give up. I don't have time now. Hannah picked up a book and pretended to read, clearly brushing him off. John walked away with a dark expression. Blatantly, she only had no time for him. It didn't matter. He wouldn't give up. He started coming even more often, going to Hannah the moment class ended to ask questions. Class rep, how do you read these? Leaning crookedly against the windowsill, John pointed at the circled words. Hannah couldn't even be bothered to say she was busy this time. She treated him like thin air. Rejected again. John took a few steps away, then turned back. He bent slightly to meet the girl's eye level and spoke cautiously. Today's my birthday. Hannah's pen paused. She lifted her eyes and glanced at him. So? The girl was wearing a pink sweater, her ponytail loosely tied high. Strands of hair fell down, brushing against her pale, delicate neck. She stood half-turned toward the sunset. The dusk outlined her silhouette, even the strands of hair atop her head glowing with a soft golden light. But the look she gave him carried not the slightest warmth, only coldness and irritation. So could you maybe pay a little attention to me? The rest of the sentence circled on his tongue several times, but in the end, he still didn't say it. John lowered his eyes awkwardly, hiding the loneliness within. After a long moment, a cold smile tugged at his thin lips. So I'm skipping class tonight to go have fun. He lifted his chin slightly, his expression arrogant. After tossing out that line, he turned and left. Hannah, aren't you afraid of pissing John off? Someone nearby asked her. Everyone was afraid of John. They hadn't expected Hannah to be this bold. She never gave him a good look. Why would I be afraid? Back on campus again, she only wanted to study peacefully, no matter how hard John was to deal with. She wasn't scared. Don't you know John's reputation? He's basically... Before the words campus tyrant could come out, Hannah nodded. I know. A fucking idiot. Everyone around her fell silent. After several weekly tests, Hannah's grades steadily climbed until she took first place. She didn't let her guard down. She arrived earliest every day and left the latest. On Christmas Day, Hannah packed up as usual after evening self-study and headed home. When she reached the deserted outdoor bike shed, she unexpectedly found a gift box in her bicycle basket. She took off her gloves and opened it, revealing a crystal snow globe, a wooden house with a burning fireplace, a little boy eating snacks, and an inconspicuous little rabbit. "Do you like it? Thought I'd be Santa Claus for once and give you a present." John stepped out from the shadows, faint smiles in his eyes, like scattered starlight reflected by moonlight. No one knew how long he had stood in the cold wind. His nose was frozen red. "Look closely. There's even a rabbit on the sofa. Isn't it especially? Hannah, why are you crying?" Before he could finish, John's expression changed abruptly. The girl in front of him was wrapped up tightly, only her eyes visible, and she was crying silently. Tears quickly soaked her mask, spreading dark, damp patches. "I just gave you a small gift. It's not like it's touching enough to make you cry. I think I didn't bring tissues. How about you use my sleeve to wipe your tears?" John fumbled through his pockets for tissues. When he couldn't find any, he instinctively wanted to reach out and wipe Hannah's tears. But he didn't dare touch her in the end. All he could do was awkwardly lift his arm and offer his sleeve. The moonlight was pale, the stars few and far between. Hannah blinked her wet lashes and set the crystal ball on the ground. She let out a breath, her face exhausted. Speaking with a thick nasal tone, she said, "John, listen carefully. You're a piece of worthless trash, good for nothing, beyond saving, and full of yourself. Every time I smell the cigarette smoke on you, I feel so sick I want to throw up. Please don't come bother me again. I really hate you." In the silent night, every word Hannah spoke was like a sharp blade, stabbing straight into John's heart. His breath caught abruptly. A piercing pain spread from his chest to his entire body without warning. John's throat tightened painfully, his whole body turning cold. So this was how unbearable he was in her eyes. Hannah went around him, pushing her bicycle away. In the cold, damp winter night, John stood there for a long time. He bent down and picked up the lonely crystal snow globe from the ground, his eyes burning red. "I thought you would like it." From that point on, he never went to look for Hannah again, as if he had been deeply shaken by what she said that night. He began studying seriously, no skipping classes, no sleeping through lessons, starting little by little from the very basics. During winter break, John spent most of his time studying at home. Because of that, he discovered his grandfather collapsed unconscious and got him to the hospital in time, saving the old man's life. When the new semester began, John worked even harder. From dead last, his grades steadily pushed their way into the middle ranks. His grandfather's illness had cost a lot of money. His meal fees went unpaid for over a week. And in the end, it was the homeroom teacher who covered them for him first. In this life, there would no longer be a foolish girl stumbling over her words, lying clumsily as she secretly paid for him. The corridor outside the classroom was often filled with girls delivering love letters. One afternoon, while Hannah was memorizing her lessons on the rooftop, she happened to run into Rosie confessing to John. The beautiful girl expressed her feelings openly and gracefully. John's eyes showed no obvious emotion, only a hint of distraction lingering between his brows. A handsome boy and a pretty girl, like a scene straight out of a teen drama. Hannah tactfully packed up her books and left. She had just reached the stairwell when John caught up to her from behind. "I don't like her." He brushed past her shoulder and walked downstairs, leaving only that one sentence behind. "None of my business." Hannah shrugged and opened her textbook again. Where had she just been reciting to? During PE class, the teacher let them do activities freely. The boys cheered and ran toward the basketball courts, while Hannah played badminton with her friends. Her ponytail wasn't tied tightly. After a few rounds, it came loose, and the hair tie fell somewhere she didn't notice. She looked left and right but didn't see it, and couldn't be bothered to search. Luckily, she had a spare on her wrist. She casually gathered her long hair and tied it up, put away her racket, and went off with her friends to play elsewhere. Seeing Hannah laughing and chatting as she walked away with others, John, on the neighboring court, put down his basketball. Ignoring the shouts behind him, he ran over, bent down, and carefully searched for the hair tie she had dropped. He found it quickly, a plain black hair tie, thin, simple, without any decoration. clean and refreshing. Just like her. John brought it close and gently inhaled, as if he could catch a trace of the girl's pleasant scent from it. Carefully, he slipped the hair tie into his pocket. The next time Hannah spoke to John was during the winter break of their senior year. Wrapped up like a little bear, Hannah snuck out late at night to buy Odin from outside her apartment complex. It had snowed during the day, piling up thick layers on the ground that crunched underfoot. Hannah had slipped out behind her parents' backs. She didn't dare bring food home, so she ate quickly by the roadside. After finishing, she threw the paper cup into a trash bin and, wearing her dog-shaped slippers, headed home with light, cheerful steps. Then she stopped abruptly. At the street corner stood John. The soft light from a dessert shop illuminated the boy's sharp yet smooth profile. John was dressed in a black down jacket, his nose high, his brows and eyes gentle. "Do you need something?" Hannah asked flatly. John's throat tightened. He didn't speak. He felt that he was truly beyond saving. Like a fool, like a madman. Because he wanted to be worthy of her, wanted to earn the right to speak to her again, he had studied with everything he had. Now, he was a good student. She was right there in front of him. Yet he didn't dare to open his mouth. "Fine. Then don't say anything." With no particular emotion, Hannah moved past his shoulder, about to head home. "Wait." John still couldn't help himself and called out to her. "What is it?" Hannah turned back and asked. "Hannah, my grades are really good now. I don't smoke or fight anymore." John pressed his lips together, his eyes stinging. "Oh," Hannah responded indifferently, waiting for him to continue. "So, could you maybe not hate me anymore? Be a little nicer to me. Just a little is enough." He struggled to suppress the tremor in his voice, which came out hoarse and broken, like a homeless drifter, humbly begging her to spare him the smallest scrap of mercy and affection. "Sorry." After a moment of silence, Hannah slowly spoke that single word. After being reborn for so long, she was already far calmer than she had been at the beginning. What happened in her previous life shouldn't be taken out on this life's John. She also knew clearly that John was no longer the reckless, unrestrained John he once was. He had shed his sharp edges. Diligent and hardworking, and already smart to begin with, he had broken into the top 5 of the class in just 1 year. All the teachers spoke highly of him, but she couldn't pretend that nothing had ever happened. Those emotions still lingered in her body. The despair of being abandoned, the terror of being robbed, her corpse gnawed by fish, her fingers cut off with a knife. At most, they could only be strangers who exchanged a few casual words. Another stretch of silence followed. "Okay, go home quickly. It's cold outside." John smiled, his eyes red. In a daze, he watched Hannah, wrapped up round and puffy, walk farther and farther away. His heart felt like it had been torn open. Icy wind pouring straight through it. Not even the slightest chance. "Little rabbit, your heart is really ruthless." In the blazing heat of June, the college entrance exams ended. After the results came out, the class organized a return to campus to collect their graduation certificates, along with a school uniform exchange event. Everyone wrote blessings on their own school uniform, handed them in to be mixed together, and then randomly drew one. On the uniform Hannah picked up, there was a single line written, "May you have much joy, long peace, and years without worry." One glance at the sharp, decisive handwriting was enough to know who had written it. "I heard you did really well on the exam." John walked over with a uniform draped over his arm, his expression clear and bright. Willow branches hung down softly. The boy looked clean and refreshed. All traces of hostility gone. Delicate features. Cool fair skin. "Not bad." Hannah nodded. "Graduation's here. Can I hug you once?" John asked hesitantly. "Sure." Hannah thought for a moment, then agreed briskly. The white t-shirt carried the fresh, pleasant scent of laundry detergent. The bitter smell of smoke had long since disappeared from John. He carefully pulled Hannah into his arms, holding her tightly, as if clutching a treasure he had regained after losing it, so tight it made Hannah's ribs ache. "Hannah, I had a dream a couple of days ago." John rested his chin in the hollow of her neck. His voice choked. "In the dream, we were desk mates for 2 years. Later, we got married. But because of another woman, I abandoned you. You died." Warm dampness spread across the skin of her neck. After a few moments of silence, Hannah broke free and said calmly, "That was just a dream. Yeah, it was only a dream. After a long while, John's eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse and low. He held Hannah's school uniform in his arms, struggling not to let his tears fall. He forced a smile, but as he smiled, he began to cry. Burning tears spilled from his eyes, one by one, splashing onto the uniform and soaking into those simple words. Hannah had written, "May your wishes come true," but what he wished for would never be granted. He had lost her, forever. Hannah, you once said that if you could live again, you would stay far, far away from me. You did very well. Goodbye. Hannah waved her hand, bidding him a polite farewell. Youth, filled with laughter and tears, vanished abruptly amid the cicadas' cries. Hannah didn't look back. Her long hair danced in the evening breeze as she merged into the pink-orange dusk. Roses will wither. The setting sun will sink into the wilderness. People misplaced in time are destined, in the end, to leave the stage.